Hi, welcome to Manly Life. This is a sermon from a recent service. I hope you enjoy. Okay, is that better? I'm going to read two passages tonight. We're going to read them together. I love how different passages play off each other and inform each other. And we're going to have a look at John 1 and 2 Corinthians 3. So one written by one of Jesus' 12 disciples, John, and one written by the Apostle Paul, who was a later follower. But you can see how the themes work together. So John 1. John 1, verse 8. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true life that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testifies concerning him. He cries out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.' From the fullness of his grace we have all received one blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is on the Father's side, has made him known." And now 2 Corinthians chapter 3. And we're going to read from verse 12 to 18. Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. We are not like Moses, who had put a veil over his face to keep the Israelites from gazing at it while the radiance was fading away. But their minds were made dull. For to this day the same veil remains when the old covenant is read. It has not been removed, because only in Christ is it taken away. Even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil covers their hearts. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we, who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. Amen. Well, our vision here at Manly Life is that we are going to join God in bringing life to Manly. And I reckon that's a pretty exciting vision. 2 Corinthians 3:6 says, "The Spirit brings life." So wherever God is, wherever his Spirit is moving in us or in a community, God is bringing life through that. So what we want to do is join with God. Join in with what his Spirit is doing here in Manly and beyond, and see that life emerge. And I guess I'm quite bold about our future as a church. This is an exciting thing that's going on. We are a baby new church, but this is an exciting thing to be a part of. Paul says again in 2 Corinthians 3:12, we just read it, that since we have such a hope, we are very bold. So it is okay to be bold about the future of this church and what it is going to do as it follows the Spirit of God into bringing life in us and in this community. Where does that boldness come from? According to Paul, it comes from God, not from our own strength, not because we are brilliant or wonderful or have great ideas, but because God has got a hold of our lives His Spirit is at work in us, and therefore we can be bold about what we are doing as a church. And I want to suggest tonight that it all relates to our encounter with glory. It all relates to our encounter with a manifestation of God's presence. So that's what I want to talk about tonight, that encounter with God, with His glory, and how that encounter changes everything. Last Sunday was really good fun. Nick Harding, who's just here at the back, gave a brilliant message about faith and film. And he did it through the prism of the film The Shawshank Redemption. There was a little bit of colourful language, but I can see you're all back, so no one was too offended. But we were tracking through The Shawshank Redemption these themes of grace and resurrection and redemption. One of the things I love about movies, about films, is that every so often when we watch one, we get to project ourselves into the story. That's why I love watching fantasy films or adventure movies. I was joking with some mates this week that after Lord of the Rings, I tried to get people to call me Strider. Didn't catch on. Someone suggested maybe I should have gone for one of the hobbits or one of the dwarves. But we see ourselves in these stories, and they kind of inform our own hopes and dreams. Now, Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit's about to come out, was a keen Christian. He used to fellowship with C.S. Lewis at Oxford, or Cambridge, one of the two. And all the way through the Lord of the Rings, his faith is informing and inspiring that story. In fact, there's a scene where Gandalf takes on a sorcerer, and it's literally an acting out of Acts chapter 13. You read Acts 13, you watch that scene, he's just written that into the Lord of the Rings. It's very cool. But it's the biggest story that I enjoy the most. It relates to this hobbit who has an encounter with someone much greater than him. And that one encounter sets him off on this new journey, this new adventure, where he will act on the forces of good against evil. And it changes everything. So you know the story. Frodo encounters Gandalf, then he sets off, and Gandalf helps him along the way. That one encounter while he's in the Shire changes everything. He leaves that sleepy, mundane existence, and he sets off on a whole new path. It's his epic adventure of good versus evil. And what the little hobbit finds is these traits that he didn't know had begin to emerge in him. This strength and this courage to persevere. And the great thing is he gets to journey with his bunch of companions and with the one who changed his life. Well, you can kind of see the reflection of the gospel story there. How have you been shaken out of your sleepy existence? Into our little lives comes the glory of God. We encounter the glory of God in Jesus Christ, and our veils are taken off, and we are able to behold the goodness and the greatness of God. We then get to explore this whole new adventure, this whole new reality that we never knew was possible until we met Jesus. We have these encounters with God where we get changed into His likeness. And in us, new passions and awakenings stir. Before, maybe we didn't care about social justice or the poor. And then all of a sudden, because you're following the one who cares about social justice and the poor, we begin that adventure too. And on this journey that we get to go on, new friendships, new community, new life. Look around. How many of these people did you not know even 3 months ago? And yet now God is forming us into a community, a people who will look after one another and go on this journey together. So what is this glory that we get to encounter? It's worth tracking it as a theme in the scriptures. The Hebrew word in the Old Testament for glory is kabod. It means weightiness or heaviness. It kind of signifies that there's a presence, something that will leave an impression upon us. Moses, after leading the people of God out of slavery and Egypt, he says to God, "Show me your glory. Show me your presence. Show me the weight of who you are, your substance." And it says the radiance of God passes Moses. When he goes down back to the people who he's led out of Egypt, his face is literally shining with the glory of the Lord. And it says that he has to put a veil over his face because no man or woman could look upon Moses. Such was the brightness reflecting from what God had done in showing himself. So glory leaves a mark. When we encounter glory, it leaves an impression on our lives. Now you'll know that in the Old Testament that is a fading glory, one that does not last, but not so in the New Testament. The next time we hear of glory appearing is the glory of the Lord shining down like this as the angels announce the coming of Jesus. It says the glory of the Lord shone around them, and the angels say, "I bring you great news of joy." Something is up. The glory of God is once again on the move, and this time it's coming as a permanent reality into the life of God's people. So we come to our passage today. In John 1 it says, "We have seen his glory." The glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father full of grace and truth. Something radical is going on now. The glory of God has reappeared on the face of this earth. And now it is viewable for all mankind. The weight of it, the visibility is there for all of us to behold. And the manifestation, the weight, the mark that it leaves on a person's life, the glory is grace and truth. In other words, if you read the Gospels, if you encounter Jesus and his glory appears to you, that glory, the weight of it, the presence of it, the impression it will leave is grace and truth. A couple of weeks back, I don't know if you remember when it was pouring with rain, one of the heaviest rains we've ever been through. Victoria and I went to the movies and it wasn't raining. And when we came out it was. And there was not an umbrella between us. So we bolted for it back to our apartment. And when we got back to our apartment, clever old me just walked straight in onto the carpet. And you could see where I'd been. There was mud. In fact, if you come around to our house now, you'll still see where I was. In the same way, Jesus leaves his mark on us. His presence in our lives, his glory leaves a mark. Now, if we have that reading, that then gives us a whole new, radical reading of the Gospels. Because every time Jesus encounters someone, that is an encounter with glory. It is the weight of God bearing down upon a person's life, changing it for good. So what should we expect when someone beholds the glory? Is this grace and truth of God to be revealed? Does that make sense? To his first disciples, Jesus says, "Come and follow me." They drop their fishing nets and they begin to follow this man. And he says, "I'm going to make you fishers of men." Now, it doesn't seem like a very remarkable encounter, but it changes the entire direction of those people's lives. To the Samaritan woman who's had a few husbands and is a bit of an outcast, The glory of God encounters her, and the glory of God tells her about her past. But he treats her with grace, and he treats her with truth. To the men born blind, to the tax collectors, glory notices them. Glory cares about their future. Glory wants to restore them. Glory wants to do something new in their lives. Glory, leaving its mark, walking through our lives, bearing down grace and truth upon us. In Acts, the journey continues. This time it's led by the Spirit. The glory of God is now on the move through the disciples who are empowered by the very presence of God. And so they are doing the acts of Jesus. Hence why it's called the book of Acts. And what happens to the Apostle Paul? He's a murderer. He's a heretic hunter. He's full of hatred. But what we read, he encounters glory. It's described as a blinding light. Isn't that interesting? There's that theme of light once again. Acts 9, a light from heaven flashed around him. And this encounter with glory transforms his life. He goes from being a murderous heretic hunter to the best preacher the world has ever known, sharing the grace and truth of Jesus Christ. So what is this encounter? How do we have it? How do we let it transform us? You know, the scriptures say that all of us have a veil. All of us are in one sense blinded from the glory of God. It's why Moses had to wear a veil. For us to encounter glory is just too much for us to bear. But in another sense, it is our sin that separates us from God. It is the veil that keeps us at arm's length from never really knowing grace and truth in our lives. We don't naturally live in that realm. We live in the realm of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, the world of karma where it can be a race to the bottom, of revenge. So here, 2 Corinthians 3:16. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. It is in our encounter with Jesus. It is in our encounter with glory that the veil is taken away. Jesus' death, the good news, is that the barrier that separates us from God has been removed. Think of him on the cross, being crucified. He cries his final breath. And there in the temple where people went to encounter the glory, but the curtain temple is torn in two. We can now have access to the presence of God. So by his Spirit, opening our eyes to this new reality, the veil is gone. And we are free to encounter grace and truth, to have that pour into our lives. You know, it's why I'm a charismatic Christian by both belief and by practice, because God is not just to be known, his glory is to be experienced. That's why sometimes when we worship, that's why sometimes when we have times of ministry, we can tangibly feel the weight of God pressing down on us. It happened at Alpha just a couple of weeks ago. In our ministry time, 2 people were sitting there and they got pinned to their chairs and they couldn't move. It was the weight of God. It was his glory pressing down on them. Just saying, I'm here. I love you. I'm alive. I've got something to do in your life. So Paul's argument then is simple. It is this experience of the Spirit that is done for us who trust in Jesus what the old covenant could never do. It has brought us into the transforming presence of God. 2 Corinthians 3, I think it's verse 18. It talks about us bearing and reflecting the divine likeness, because we can behold glory now. And what we behold, what we love, what we stare at, what we reflect, we are transformed into that likeness. The veil is gone. We can now reflect God. We can encounter His presence. We can be transformed. And all we have to do is just behold God, the glory of Jesus, His grace and truth, and then follow that grace, follow that truth, follow that light into the world, doing what it would do. And you will be transformed. So to whom does this glory appear? To whom then is this opportunity to find freedom and to be transformed available to? To women who've had too many husbands to remember. To tax collectors. To sinners. To the homeless. To those who are afflicted by evil spirits. To those who are poor in spirit, who recognize their need for God's presence in their lives. To them, the veil is taken away. And so our ministry is very simple. Our vision becomes very simple. We just have to cooperate with God in helping to remove as many veils as possible. That's why Alpha is always going to be at the very heart of this church. Some things are negotiable, Alpha is not. Because in Alpha, people get to encounter the glory of God when they meet Jesus. Have you got the invite to come tonight? You'll read that I want to share a bit of the vision. Well, it is simple. We want to be a church that beholds the glory of God in Jesus. We want to be transformed by His presence. And then we want to take His glory to the world. Is there anyone here who'd be up for that? You know, I could go on and talk about some of the dreams and the visions and the hopes that are emerging. Maybe getting involved with the Salvation Army here in one of their homeless dinners. Supporting Christian surfers. Getting involved up at the International College of Management where there's 300 international students. Nights for prayer, nights for healing, life groups, barbecues in the community. But to be honest, it's very simple. We just want to behold the glory of God in Jesus Christ. We want to be transformed by that glory, and then we want to see that glory cover this area. I want to see Jesus walk all over people's lives. Because if He does, they will be marked by grace and truth. You can always tell where Jesus has been. We're going to close there. I can see that the slushy machine is almost ready. I think we're going to have to do about 15 minutes of ministry just to make sure it's frozen. You know, there is so much to give thanks for. We are a new church, 3 months old. But already I am just so full of gratefulness to God that we all get to meet one another, that we get to meet together, that we get to dream about the future. In a minute we're going to respond to the glory of God by asking Him just to come and reveal His glory to us. But I really want to end by inviting you into that adventure. You know, it's not dissimilar to the Lord of the Rings. We meet Jesus, and then we get launched into this remarkable mission. And if you commit to coming on a Sunday, you're going to meet some remarkable people to go on this adventure with. And new character traits are going to emerge in you. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. And you get to join in this mission in carrying the glory of God into our world. Amen. Let's stand. We're going to pray, have some ministry.